Do you want to know how to calculate return on investment on a glam site? Well, then you're in luck because in today's video, we are talking to Terry Berger, who is a very experienced real estate investor who has years of experience analyzing deals and is going to walk us through step by step how you can understand if a particular property or a campsite will be an excellent deal for your glam site. So let's get into it. All right, Terry. So welcome to the channel and thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Laura, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Got this nice toasty fire, kind of cold and damp outside. This is nice.
Yeah. So tell us where we're at.
We are at Bison View Lodge in Helen, Georgia, having a little mastermind together. We're just kind of sitting here hanging out in the family room.
Yeah, great. Well, when you would analyze, you showed us how you analyze the deal for this property. I wanted us to sit down and share with the audience more of your expertise because it's something that people ask about a lot. And it's such an important skill set to know whether a particular property or a piece of land is going to be a good deal.
Yeah.
So I would love to just have you walk us through what is your step-by-step process for analyzing a deal.
Well, I think step by step, the first thing that we have to understand is before you even get into the analysis piece of it, it is, will the community support what you're trying to do, right? Such a big component, because if not, you're going to spend 30, 40 hours working on underwriting and figuring out, and all underwriting is, I mean, for people who are kind of new to it, is it's just analyzing. It's a fancy word that you hear in insurance and stuff a lot, but seriously, underwriting is simply just putting together what you think the math is going to be on a particular project. So I think that's the first thing. Is the county or the city or whatever going to be open to the idea that you have?
Okay. So let's say that they are open to it. You can realize the project that you want to put out into the world. How would you go about analyzing whether or not you're actually going to be profitable? What are all the costs that you have to factor in?
So let's give me an example of what you're talking about. What are we gonna analyze?
So I think most people that want to get into glamping are going to look to buy a piece of raw land.
Okay.
And they're going to have to prepare that land to build on it and then actually do the construction and then run it as a glamp site. And most people are probably looking to do more temporary structures like safari tents and bell tents, things like that, that if you look around on Airbnb are probably commanding anywhere from $200 a night up to a couple $1,000s a night if you do them in a really luxurious way.
Yeah.
So that's probably what most people are looking to do.
Okay. I would say the first thing on a glamping site is, if you're looking for raw land, you're probably looking at a bunch of different kinds of raw land, right? Like we were looking at a piece of raw land that actually had an RV hookup in it, which was huge, right? It already had a septic tank. It already had water brought to the site. And so a lot of the heavy lifting for the utilities that kind of overwhelm people was already done. And you have to figure out, okay, how much more is that worth to me? Mm-hmm. It could be worth a lot. So somebody might say, well, a regular piece of land is $75,000, but this particular site here that has RV and everything, and it might be worth $135,000. Well, and they're asking $135,000. Well, $60,000 is a big difference, right? So we have to figure out, okay, well, you're right. $60,000 is a lot more. That's going to impact your bottom line. But how much does it cost to bring in that water? If you on a piece of raw land, how much does it cost to put in a septic system? And then you start to kind of run down the path of how much time is that going to take with city permits and all that. So you're looking now maybe 90 days, 120 days before you can even start thinking about touching your site, because you've got to get approvals for all those things. So in my mind, if I'm underwriting it, I'm going to pay $60,000 more for that lot, but they've done so much of the heavy lifting for me that I don't have to wait. I can go put a glamping sign on there tomorrow if the city has already kind of given me a green light, and I'm good to go, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I can summarize what you're saying, I think you're making a couple of really important points. Is one, cheaper is not always better.
Correct.
And two, that there's a risk involved in setting up raw land, right? Yeah, because it's going to take you a lot of time and it could cost more than you project.
Yeah.
Or you may run into some issues that extend your timeline. Like there are just risks in developing raw land such that if you can find a piece of property that is maybe more expensive, but it has some of that infrastructure done, it could be worth it.
Yeah. And I'm a natural skeptic, which makes me, I think, a good underwriter because I think everybody's out to get me. And so you kind of have to take that approach, right? Everybody's out to get you. This dirt has been here for thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years, whatever, right? And it's got a history to it. So why is it, has any seller, is the seller holding back information? Because like a house, right? If you go buy a house, you've got a seller's property disclosure statement. You have all this information on this house that you can make decisions with. Well, on a raw piece of land, it's easy for an owner to just kind of sit back and not tell you everything. What if they've tried to put water on that land before? What if they've tried to build a house on it before? You know, oh, there's an underground spring, all over the place or whatever. So you have to really start to get to understand that. So I would say the biggest thing you could do, or at least the biggest tip I could tell your audience would be to go try to find some land that has some of these amenities. It's amenity rich already, and then go from there. And if you're talking then raw land, okay, let's think about what needs to go on raw land. You've got to have probably septic or sewer, right? Sewer would be great, but most rural areas are septic. You have to have water of some sort, whether you're drilling a well, and you have to just know all of those hard costs. And I think that's where people get stuck. They're like, we were talking a little bit this week about this, right? Like, you get stuck on the things that you don't know anything about, and we forget that people know all about those things. So my first thing would be I'd be calling a plumber. Hey, how much is it? If my land's fairly flat, what is it per foot to run plumbing? Can you just tell me that? And then I can go take the measurement 200 feet to the clamp site, and I know kind of an idea of what my water's going to cost.
Okay.
Same thing with your septic tank or your well or whatever.
Okay. So then step one is to find some knowledgeable people, right? So you want to talk to a plumber, you want to talk to septic installers, and then you want to tell them about your project, your land, and sort of get a ballpark figure for what that might cost, whether it's a per foot cost or for the size of the septic.
Yeah, build your team, right? Maybe that's it. Step one is build that team that you can rely on, because you're going to use them again and again and again.
Okay.
And eventually, whether it's this project or the next project, you're going to use that.
Okay.
And so build that team.
Okay. So let's say that you've done that initial legwork. You have talked to your various experts in plumbing and septic and electrical, and you have your ballpark figures for what that's going to cost. What's the next step in figuring out your costs? Because ultimately, we want to figure out what the ROI is. But we can't do that until we know how much it's going to cost. So what's your next step?
Okay, so let's say you got the land for 125, and now you know the cost of, well, let's say we bought that land that's got the RV site on it, right? So I don't have to put water on it. I don't have to, so this one's easy. We don't have to do any of that stuff. So now what are my hard costs in terms of my glamping site, my furniture, all of that kind of stuff, right? Then you put all those totals together into, I call it your all-in cost. Like, what is the most this thing could cost you?
Okay.
Right? And so, how do you find out those glamping costs? I mean, your audience is, they're interested in glamping, right? So they probably have researched domes or glamping tents or whatever, or yurts, whatever the thing is that they love. They need to know what those prices are. Then they need to know how to furnish it, what to furnish it. And I'm sure you've got lots of great content that gives them these formulas on how to go deeper and know what some of these costs are going to be. And then once you get that all in cost, then you could just run the math through a simple calculator.
So
I've got a simple one I'd be happy to give you that you can give to your audience. It's just a little spreadsheet. You just punch in the numbers and it'll show you what you might make.
Okay. So it sounds like it's fairly simple to understand what your building costs are. So whether you have a piece of land that already has some of that infrastructure, or you're developing raw land, you can talk to some knowledgeable people. One piece you didn't mention that I do want to point out is that, if you are getting wooded land and you're going to have to clear some of those trees, meaning cut out some of those trees, that's an additional expense.
Yeah.
That you'll have to factor in.
One of your team members needs to be a grader.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Once you get the cost to develop, you'll get the cost of how much it is to purchase the tent and then to furnish the tent. I'm assuming you're going to want to do some landscaping around the property because you don't want people walking in mud. So you can kind of get estimates for all of those costs. So now, are other calculations you recommend people to run so that they know it's a good deal?
Okay, right. So let's say we buy this lot for $125,000, and then we're all in on the glamping, tent, furniture, everything else for $75,000. So just keep the numbers round. $200,000, right? And then if you're using all your own cash, let's just say you have cash and you're going to use your own cash. So 200,000, the question then becomes, now I have to know how much money I can make and so I can calculate what my cash on cash return would be, right? So if I have $200,000 and I start looking around and see who else has glamping sites, right? And how much are they getting? And how often are they rented? So simple thing to do for us is we just go on Airbnb. We kind of like we're searching for a glamping tent. That's what we're going to put on this, let's say. Search for a glamping tent. And if there's none in the area, that's always a good thing. But the bad part is you don't really have a comp. So then you have to find other little glamping niches, right, that you can comp off of. But let's say that you can generate.
What about your expenses?
Expenses. They're expenses? So yeah, you have to factor in your electric costs, your cleaning costs, your toilet paper costs, firewood costs. Do you have a mini split in the system that keeps it warm year round? Like, what are you trying to do there? And you have to know every single cost that you have. But so let's say that $60,000 in income ends up being 40. So now I know that on my $200,000 investment, I can make $40,000. I think if the math works out right, that's about a 20% cash on cash return on that. If we're using it simple like that.
Okay. Yeah. And is a 20% cash on cash return a good deal in your mind?
I think if you're just getting started, that would be a tremendous way to learn and get paid.
Okay.
Yeah. For me,
Yeah.
I think 20% is good. Yeah.
Now, what are some of the mistakes that people make when they are underwriting deals or analyzing?
They get too emotionally involved. That's the biggest one. People are freaking out. They love it. They're, and that's the thing. When you get into these unique stays, we get super attached to them. And then we try to force square pegs into round holes because we like a property. What do we like about it? I mean, if I could just maybe step back and say, it's really important that you put your product where people want to go.
Yep.
Right? So small little town, people travel to, whatever, you got to make sure, and I'm sure that's what you talk about all the time. I think you've got to understand all of your costs, and if 20% works, it works.
So it sounds like, people can get attached to like a certain location or a certain business model. And if the numbers, aren't telling them that it's a good deal, they might do it anyway because it's something they like to do. How can people kind of reel themselves in and not make an expensive mistake and invest in something that's not going to make a ton of money?
People are going to go make 5-figure mistakes all the time. And my advice is you seek out a consultant. You find somebody that you can pay $500 for an hour of their time. I mean, my gosh, that sounds expensive, $500 for 60 minutes. And it is expensive, except when I know that person's going to save me $10,000, right?
Yep.
And so you go find a consultant who knows it, understands it, and has experienced the failures that go along with the thing that you're trying to do. And you're basically just trying to hack their knowledge for a very reasonable fee, right?
So how would people find folks like that?
Well, I know you do some of that. So I call you if I need something like that. If I was to open a glamping site, you're the first person I will call. But it could be people that you network with in the local area. Maybe you start a little real estate meetup for unique stays in your area, and you guys have a lunch once a month at a local restaurant. So you're supporting the local economy, you're learning about the area at the same time, and you're meeting new people at the same time. That's a cool way to do it. And then, but sometimes as investors, we're pretty closed off to the people close to us because you've got to protect, like, we're in competition.
Yeah.
If somebody comes up and opens a better glamping site than you, it impacts your income. So then it's like, well, you should start going to conferences, and that way bring people to conferences. But the cheapest way to do it, honestly, is to find somebody like you and call and set up an appointment and run the numbers with us.
Yeah. Okay. That's great advice. So how can people find you if they're interested in learning more about what you do here, as well as in your other real estate ventures?
Yeah. So we've got this big lodge called Bison View Lodge in Helen, Georgia. It's in the Northeast Georgia mountains. If people would like to learn more about what we do or come stay or whatever, you can visit us on Instagram at Bison View Lodge. Maybe you follow me on Instagram at Terry Berger, the official Terry Berger.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope it was helpful for you. If you want to become an Airbnb host, my links are down below for becoming an Airbnb host. You can also furnish and decorate your Airbnbs like a pro. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Bye-bye.